Oh, oh, there we go. Right, we're probably live, Beena. We're probably live. I'm not sure,
Hello
but I
and
think so.
welcome to, yes, okay. Hello and welcome to Moreness-Culture. Good morning, Syl. Good morning, Grain.
Yes. Good morning,
And
Beena. Good morning.
yes, good
You gotta
morning
give me
to
space
everyone.
to say good morning back there. I know you're
Because
all
you
fond
get
of
you get a
introduction,
bit
but
lost into that. You always reply me later, like, oh yes, Veena, yes,
right.
yes,
Well,
yes,
because you
yes.
don't give me that little gap to jump in and say good morning, Beena. That's why. I like that. I like being a it's like for me personally, if I don't respond to when you say good morning, so I feel wrong. I feel like
And I feel that okay, you are too busy to respond to that, so I just say that okay,
no,
yeah,
no. I mean,
and
I
then
can
move
do
on.
my things. So I'm just going to say good morning, Spina, and then you carry on, right? Just give me that
Okay, okay.
little
Before we
half a
go,
second there.
we get so much involved in our discussion. Good morning again. Good morning, sir.
Good morning,
And
Spina.
yes, and good morning, Grain, and good morning to everyone who is going to join us live and will watch us recorded later. If by chance you find this video interesting, yes, because it is getting more and more casual as the time is passing by, but also it is getting more profound because what we are
Yeah,
doing, what we are
yeah.
busy with, it is doing the capital R reading of Carlos Castaneda's books about Don Juan. And this is
Yeah.
something very special. It's a special reading for me personally. Everything I do in my
Oh, yeah.
life, I feel that it brings so much moreness. That's why everything is
Yeah,
special.
yeah,
Everything is so
yeah.
wonderful and profound.
Exactly.
But few things are a bit more than others, and this
Yes,
is
yes.
one of them
Yeah.
because this having this awareness that it was and still is hugely influential for so
Oh,
many
yeah.
people
Oh,
and of
yeah.
course a whole generation at that time
Yeah,
is a big deal for me. I
yeah,
want to
yeah.
see that moreness because I can assume that oh yes, yeah, it was a personal favorite for someone. Okay, it was a
Yeah.
personal favorite or for a group of people. But if you see that the whole generation, or just like okay for a
Couple of
huge, a big
generations.
yes, couple of okay, yes. So couple of generations and also for decades, if something
Yeah.
is still
Oh, shush.
profound,
Yeah, yeah,
is a big huge
yeah.
deal. We need to pay due respect to that. This is the
Yes, yes,
requirement of way of
yes.
impeccability,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm
Oh,
very
yeah.
keen to pay due respect to all of it,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
to Don Juan and especially to Carlos. Carlos
Yes,
for me did a wonderful job because
yes.
being whatever you guys call him, Don Juan was calling him fool. Syl was being very rude to him, but uh,
A nincompoop, yeah. Oh, well, I
yes,
wasn't
whatever
rude to
you want
him.
to.
I was just being accurate, being rude to
Yes,
him.
yes, you were. Oh, yes, you were. Like, okay, he's a knucklehead. Come on, Carlos. Yeah, come on. Yes. So this is what you were doing to him. It was rude.
Well, all right, all right.
He,
To be really accurate, I'm actually scolding myself via Carlos. All right, just make that clear.
okay, because Carlos is by being who he is exactly like this. He really helped a lot for
Yeah.
other people.
Oh yeah. Oh
That
yeah.
alternative reality was a completely alien thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Carlos was alien to that, which
Yes.
and I personally feel that his behavior was in most of the cases very appropriate.
Yeah.
If you don't
Yeah.
know what it is, like the story I shared with Sir before, for the like by birth a blind person, a visually impaired person
Right. Right.
with special needs, and someone says that okay, have you ever tasted rice pudding? And he says, what is this? And then a
Yeah.
person tried to explain what rice pudding is. So if someone has never tasted something like that, of course you're going to say, "Oh, it's sweet and soft, okay, and it just smells like that, okay." And then, but what it is, okay, it is something. It's a mixture of. So what's special about that? And these type of questions was being asked by that blind person, and ultimately that the person who was trying to share something good and his favorite with him, he says that, oh, it is white like a swan. And I says, okay, and what does that swan look like what it is? And that to explain whiteness of swan to a blind person was a huge difficult task for him. So of
Wow.
course he tried everything, and then he shape his hand and say that, okay, and put his hand, the blind person's hand, on his hand and say, this is how the swan is. We say then the rice pudding is a very difficult thing to eat. It's too curvy to eat.
Yeah. Not
See,
not
and
not
that was
conducive. Not conducive. Yeah.
exactly. And my granny used to share that story with us. And
Yeah.
another story I will share at some point, of appropriateness,
Yes.
because she used to
Yes.
share that story with us.
I
Anyway,
I
this
want to
this
take this
thing,
opportunity to take your
yeah.
story and put it into a Moreness context. Yeah. Hang on
Oh
one
yes,
second.
please, please,
I
please.
need some side
Oh
lighting
please.
here. See, my half my
Oh
face was
wow.
in shadow. So
Vanity, vanity, vanity.
professionalism, Bina. Professionalism, not vanity. Professionalism.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yeah. Bina knows she can
Yes.
tease me about vanity because I must be about the most unvain person there is. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway, I mean, I don't think I'd come on TV with messed up teeth if I wasn't vain, if I was vain, I mean. Anyhow,
No, no, no,
right,
he is not. Yes, but as
right.
appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. But on your story, this is a common story
Yes.
that's shared in the abstract, that's shared many times. The difficulty of explaining something to somebody who doesn't know it, and it very much comes up with Don Juan trying to explain capital P perceiving, which is what book 2 is all about. If you look at the table of contents, I think it's the task of seeing and then something else, like two sections, but both of them are perceiving, about perceiving, capital P perceiving, right? I mean, Carlos and Don Juan use the term seeing, but we've updated that to perceiving because it's later in the series. Don Juan says this is not a good term to use. You don't want it to be connected to visual. So it's very difficult to explain because it's something outside of our imaginations. But to get back to your story about the blind person specifically, this is an example that's very often used about the difficulties of communication. However, Moreness. I want to introduce a Moreness concept related to the story of a blind person and describing something to a blind person. I personally feel it's not quite as impossible as we believe it to be. Why? DNA. Yeah. In with DNA, things carry over. Look at insecurity. Insecurity is profound across the world. It's inherent in our DNA. Why? Because our ancestors were feeling insecure all the time, and their ancestors and their ancestors. It's something that never goes away, right? I mean, especially if you look at in nature. If you don't feel insecure in nature, you're food. Let me repeat that. If you do not feel insecure in nature, you're food. In other words, you're going to get eaten. Yeah. I mean, the bunny who's not feeling insecure gets eaten
Hmm.
because they do. They hop around, la 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 la, everything's okay. And then when they get attacked, then suddenly they feel the insecurity and run away. But in general, they're not looking around them to be aware, and that's why they get eaten all the time. Yeah, because they don't
Oh,
feel insecure.
yes.
See what I mean? All right. And when you got skittish, like you see sometimes you see a herd, and the herd's a bit skittish. Or deer, you can see this with deer very often. They'll be eating, and they just don't quite feel comfortable, and then they'll look up a little bit, and then they'll eat a bit, or they'll just move on, right? Because they don't quite. Insecurity makes them move, and they become difficult to hunt. Yeah? So insecurity very important. And well, I'm using this as an example of something that carries over in our DNA. It's a very, very big deal and it's very profound. And we've been insecure, physically insecure, for aeons. It's only in our modern era where we have relative more security. And look how, even in the modern era, where your chances of, being murdered in your house are very minimal, people still feel insecure. Yeah. and look at the attraction of castles and stuff like this, even in our modern day, right? Bunkers, people want to go live in bunkers to be secure and all this, right? So it's a very big driving force. My point is that we have an influence from DNA things. Not only that, but we know how DNA from carrying over stuff from our parents or family stuff, generational trauma, stuff like this, how it carries over. Likewise, the understanding of seeing, of visualness, because it's so predominant and it's something that's so inherent in you. You take it for granted that you know what it is. I feel that that DNA knowledge of seeing things, of what they look like, and hearing likewise for deaf people, it carries over. So when you're explaining to somebody, if you keep that in mind, make your explanation anyway, whether they can understand it with their mind of now doesn't matter. Especially if you were to say to the blind person, trust in your DNA to give you an idea of this. And the reason I say this is because, as far as I know, blind people do dream.
Hmm.
How is that possible, you would say? Yeah.
Yes.
So when we think of it in this way, now it's a different story altogether. Yes. You see what I'm saying? So your story is presuming that the blind person has no possible way of knowing what you're talking about. Yeah. But that's not true,
Hmm.
right?
I'm thinking.
This is a very profound thing. I mean, when we put in this DNA connectivity, with DNA, you don't have a memory, but you have an understanding, which is different, right? You don't remember stuff from within, but like insecurity, you have an understanding of it. You feel it. It's there in you, right? It just carries over. And likewise, things like
So your
temperness. You
sound
don't
is.
remember having a bad temper in your previous life, but it carries over and you just have it. Yeah. 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 Right. Furthermore, right? Um, just because you're blind doesn't necessarily mean that you can't perceive at all. Yeah. Uh, when I was a boy, our neighbors, uh, two girls, and then their young brother, and he was blind. Now, I don't know if he was 100% blind or not. I don't remember. I thought so. But what was interesting about him was that he liked to sit in front of the TV. The TV
Hmm.
was very new then; it had just come out, and it made a difference to him. He could connect there something. But also, if you think of closing your eyes and you have sunshine shining on your eyes, see, you have a sensation there and a perception that's not necessarily directly connected to sight. Yeah, yeah. Um, so. People who are blind have visual dreams. They may experience some visual elements in dreams, but these are likely limited to abstract visual sensations. But it's not very clear. But it is my understanding that even if you're blind from birth, you can dream. Yeah, uh, it's not necessarily that common. But my point is, either way, there are other possibilities of connecting to things. Yeah. So to wrap it all up, that in your story, it's not entirely impossible to be able to explain a rice pudding or the color white to a blind person or whatever. It's
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
necessarily impossible. Maybe difficult, but not necessarily possible. Yeah, the moreness of it. Yeah, and I like that. That
Yes.
that that to me is very cool. Yes. Yeah. You agree, sweetness, Beena?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well, not that I'm looking for your agreement, but I should say, does that make sense? Yeah. No.
No, I would not give you my agreement if you were looking for it, so that then it's
Yeah,
going to be
yeah,
available.
yeah, yeah. I
No,
know, I know, I
but
know.
yeah, but yes, I understand your point.
Yeah. Well, that's what I meant. Did I make my point clearly? That's really what I
Yes.
was after, and that's quite important, to 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 have that feeling. Oh yes, I have to change my view to speaker view for IG. I'm glad I remembered that. All right, let's go. Let's go. And I don't know what's up with TikTok again. Come on, TikTok, man. You were working so nicely, and then you stopped working. I don't know what changed. Anyway. All right. Screen share and continue where we were yesterday. We stopped at a very profound point, and now we're going to get into a whole new thing again. So very cool. Very cool. Oh, well, you see, again, now TikTok is streaming. Why? I have no idea. None. I just turned it off and turned it on again, and it's streaming. So, hello, TikTokers. But I'm not doing it through the live studio, so I don't see the chat. It's just there on TikTok. So, all right. It says it's streaming. So, what can we do? Uh, Don Juan was talking about the description of the world, right? The world is all that is encased here: life, death, people, the allies, and everything else that surrounds us. The world is incomprehensible. We won't ever understand it. We won't ever unravel its secrets. Thus, we must treat it as it is, a sheer mystery. An average person doesn't do this, though. The world is never a mystery to them. And when they arrive at old age, they are convinced they have nothing more to live for. An old person has not exhausted the world. They have exhausted only what people do. But in their stupid confusion, they believe that the world has no more mysteries for them. What a wretched price to pay for our shields! A warrior is aware of this confusion and learns to treat things properly. The things that people do cannot, under any conditions, be more important than the world. And thus, a warrior treats the world as an endless mystery, and what people do as an endless folly. Right? There's just a huge, huge point here. I don't think I saved this to my file. Uh, I, I thought I did, but I was just looking at that file earlier and it didn't save it. So let's copy it. Yeah. All right, Beena, and that's what we want to do. We were talking about this last time, right? And I've been I emphasize this is how the whole capital H hearing program came about, right? From shifting to hearing the world. Oh, I did save it. Here it is. Okay, I just didn't put in the page. Right. It's a big shift this to listening to the world. Take this predominance of away from our ears, and the reason for our eyes to shift it to the ears. The reason for this is that it enables us to move away from this constantly describing the world, because we're in the habit of describing what we see. To describe what we hear is not quite as easy. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a little different. All right. So here we are on this next part of things, and
You read, sir. It's black
all
for
right.
me, and yeah,
Oh, oh, oh.
it's
Well,
going to
it'll
be,
come
but
in a moment. It'll come in a
yes,
moment.
but still.
All right. All right. I'll read. Hey, hey, what's going on here now? I began the exercise of listening to the sounds of the world. Let me make this a little bit clearer. The sounds of the world is not necessarily the wind or the cars or people talking or whatever. It is to listen to the world, to feel what the world is communicating, to feel the mood of the world, to feel the attitude of the world, to feel the intent of the world. Okay? You're gonna initially when you start listening, you're gonna hear the ordinary sounds. But you want to go beyond that to hear the mood, the attitude, the intent of the world, right? The moreness, right? In other words, right? What you don't expect. I began the exercise of listening to the, oh, this is Carlos now. I began the exercise of listening to the sounds of the world and kept at it for 2 months, as Don Juan had specified. It was excruciating at first to listen and not look, but even more excruciating was not to talk to myself. By the end of the 2 months, I was capable of shutting off my internal dialogue for short periods of time, and I was also capable of paying attention to sounds. I arrived at Don Juan's house at 9 a.m. on November 10, 1969. We should start that trip right now, he said upon my arrival at his house. I rested for an hour, and then we drove towards the low slopes of the mountains to the east. We left my car in the care of one of his friends who lived in that area, while we hiked into the mountains. Don Juan had put some crackers and sweet rolls in a knapsack for me. There were enough provisions for a day or two. I had asked Don Juan if we needed more. He shook his head negatively. We walked the entire morning. It was a rather warm day. I carried 1 canteen of water, most of which I drank myself. Don Juan only drank twice. When there was no more water, he assured me it was all right to drink from the streams we found along the way. He laughed at my reluctance. After a short while, my thirst made me overcome my fears. And this is a joke that goes on to before, because Carlos has this American thing that if you go to other countries, don't drink the water. I mean, all right, if you're not talking about tap water, fair enough. But in America, some of the tap water is also poisonous, right? So it also applies here. But it's a stereotype thing, and people are afraid of getting diarrhea from drinking the water. It doesn't apply to streams, for crikey's sake. Come on, uh, seriously. So that's why Don Juan was amused, right? And after a short while, my thirst made me overcome my fears. Quite fascinating. This idea, how it affects his behavior. And it's we did a whole live the other day on believed value versus actual value. And this fear of drinking the water, it's so generalized that the believed value completely overtakes the actual value. There's no discernment. It's just blanket, right? And it's one of Carlos's problems, not discerning. It's very amusing. In the early afternoon, we stopped in a small valley at the bottom of some lush green hills. Let me back up one moment. Carlos's nincompoopery, Carlos's limited awareness, Carlos's knuckleheadedness, Carlos's narrowness, Carlos's prejudices, Carlos's biases, Carlos's habits of thinking, like in this case, right? Where he has beliefs which completely override his sensibility and his sobriety and his practicality, like this thing with the water. The value of it is that Carlos is demonstrating that anybody, even such a profound nincompoop as Carlos, anybody, because we all have Carlos in us to greater or lesser degrees. Carlos has just got the whole range of it. Yeah? But anybody, regardless of who they are, can become more. The path is open to anyone. Okay? To me, this is the great, profound value, and why Carlos was in this. The universe uses Carlos because he demonstrates that despite of all of his nonsense, he could learn, he could change. Yeah? That makes sense, Beena?
Yes.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal, yes? Very, very big deal. All right. In the early afternoon, we stopped in a small valley at the bottom of some lush green hills. Behind the hills, toward the east, the high mountains were silhouetted against the cloudy sky. You can think, you can write about what we say or about what you perceive, but nothing about where we are. We rested for a while, and then he took a bundle from inside his shirt. He untied it and showed me his pipe. He filled its bowl with smoking mixture, lighted a match, and kindled a small dry twig, placed the burning twig inside the bowl, and told me to smoke. Without a piece of charcoal inside the bowl was difficult to light the pipe. Without a piece of charcoal inside the bowl, It was difficult to light the pipe. We had to keep kindling twigs until the mixture caught on fire. This particular smoking mixture has a lower incendiary point than typical tobacco. Without a piece of charcoal inside the bowl, it was difficult to light the pipe. We had to keep kindling twigs until the mixture caught fire. When I had finished smoking, he said, we were there so I could find out. He said we were there so I could find out the kind of game I was supposed to hunt. He carefully repeated 3 or 4 times. The most important aspect of my endeavor was to find some holes. He emphasized the word holes and said that inside them a sorcerer could find all sorts of messages and directions. And again, I feel I'm a little surprised that Don Juan doesn't emphasize that he's speaking metaphorically, not literally. Yes, we're going to see later on. It is in a way literal, but you have to get out of the very literal physical hole. It's a literal hole, but in a different context, right? So just think contextually holes and be more open rather than specific, right? And it's difficult for Carlos. He's very specific. I wanted to ask what kind of holes they were. Don Juan seemed to have guessed my question and said they were impossible to describe and were in the realm of perceiving. All right, so there he does it now. He repeated at various times, I should focus all my attention on listening to sounds and do my best to find the holes between the sounds. He said he was going to play his spirit catcher 4 times. I was supposed to use those ear recalls as a guide to the ally who had welcomed me. That ally would then give me the message I was seeking. Don Juan told me I should stay in complete alertness, since he had no idea how the ally would manifest himself to me. Just a quick little aside point. For the discerning reader and listener, somebody who's reading and listening, you may have noticed something in my reading of particularly these last 2 or 3 paragraphs. Did you notice something, Beena?
Softness.
You notice what?
Extra gentleness, softness.
Oh, it's hard to hear you, Beena. You're a little far from the mic.
I'm saying extra gentleness and
Oh,
softness.
well, I feel you were just listening then. You weren't reading along with it, yes?
No, I was not because my eyes
Okay,
have
okay.
irritation, so I cannot.
Oh,
That's why I'm not
right.
reading.
Okay. Well, the point I'm making, if you were reading, you may have noticed that I skipped over the that's. There were like 5 that's, unnecessary that's in this thing here, right?
No, I was
When
not
I had
taking.
finished smoking, he
Yes.
said that we were there. When we had finished smoking, he said we were there. So I could. Carlos is like most writers, they use the word that unnecessarily and way too much, right? They have a superfluity of that. If I've done editing for people before, and it's a lot of work, and I don't have time to do it now. But should I do editing for somebody now, I won't say, well, how much is it going to cost? Editing can be quite expensive. I mean, if you go to typical editors for a regular novel, it's going to cost you like 2,000 plus or minus, right? Maybe 3, maybe 4. It's seldom going to be close to 1,000. But I would just say, I'll charge you per that. I'll just charge you $10 per that. How about that? How does that? For every superfluous that which I remove, I charge you $10. Does that sound like a good deal? Oh yeah, sure. Do you think you use that too much? No. Most have no idea. Yeah, like right here in this page. Well, let me just show you. Let me just show you. I mean, it's an interesting point because it just happens to be so much in this case that it had come about. Yeah. It's just fascinating.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I was reading somebody's book, a friend on Goodreads. Every single page, there's at least one that, right? So you got a 200-page book right there, at least one, sometimes many more, right? So if it's just one per page in a 200-page book, already I'm at 2,000. Yeah, likely it's going to be even more, right? So, if it's 1.5, that's 3,000. Yeah. It's absolutely fascinating how we don't notice it until you do start noticing it. Like me, that's why I notice it here, and it gets a bit like, oh man, seriously. Now, in your mind, from a reader writing point of view, those excess words, they produce reader fatigue, and you don't even notice it, but it starts building up because it's unnecessary, right? And they're redundant, superfluous, and you want to avoid that. Yeah, it's very, very, very important. Oh, I thought the search would highlight them, but it doesn't do it, unfortunately. Yeah, sometimes it will highlight them, so I can't show you all the that's here now. Anyway, and of course they're not always inappropriate, but you have to use them sparingly, right? And oh, dang it. Now it took me to the start of the things. Anyway, well, already there are 23,000 instances of that. Right, it's a long document, so it's 14 books, so fair enough. I have to. I messed this up. All right. 113. Sorry, I'm messing things up here now. Dang it. Okay. All right. To pick up where we were, Don Juan told me I should stay in complete alertness, since he had no idea how the ally would manifest himself to me. I listened attentively. I was sitting with my back against the rock side of the hill. I experienced a mild numbness. Don Juan warned me against closing my eyes. I began to listen, and I could distinguish the whistling of birds, the wind rustling the leaves, the buzzing of insects. As I placed my individual attention on those sounds, I could actually make out 4 different types of bird whistlings. I could distinguish the speeds of the wind in terms of slow or fast. I could also hear the different rustlings of 3 types of leaves. The buzzings of insects were dazzling. There were so many, I could not count them or correctly differentiate them. I was immersed in a strange world of sound, as I had never been in my life. I began to slide to my right. Don Juan made a motion to stop me, but I caught myself before he did. I straightened up and sat erect again. Don Juan moved my body until he had propped me on a crevice in the rock wall. He swept the small rocks from under my legs and placed the back of my head against the rock. He told me imperatively to look at the mountains to the southeast. I fixed my gaze in the distance, but he corrected me and said I should not gaze but look, sort of scanning, at the hills in front of me and at the vegetation on them. He repeated over and over I should concentrate all my attention on my hearing. Sounds began to predominate again. It was not so much now I guess that here. It was not so much that I wanted to hear them, rather, they had a way of forcing me to concentrate on them. The wind rustled the leaves. The wind came high above the trees, and then it dropped into the valley where we were. Upon dropping, it touched the leaves of the tall trees first. They made a peculiar sound, which I fancied to be a sort of rich, raspy, lush sound. Then the wind hit the bushes, and their leaves sounded like a crowd of small things. It was an almost melodious sound, very engulfing and quite demanding. Oh, very cool. Very engulfing and quite demanding. It seemed capable of drowning everything else. I found it displeasing. I felt embarrassed because it occurred to me I was like the rustle of the leaves, nagging and demanding. Very interesting how he personalizes it. Yeah. The sound was so akin to me that I hated it. Then I heard the wind rolling on the ground. It was not a rustling sound, but more of a whistle, almost a beep or a flat buzz. Listening to the sounds the wind was making, I realized all 3 of them happened at once. I was wondering how I'd been capable of isolating each of them when I again became aware of the whistling of birds and the buzzing of insects. At one moment, there were only the sounds of the wind, and the next moment, a gigantic flow of other sounds emerged at once into my field of awareness. Logically, all the existing sounds must have been continually emitted during the time I was hearing only the wind. This is the capability that we have, especially with sound. Yes, and it's very easy to train. It's very easy to train our ears to isolate sounds and hear only those sounds and de-emphasize everything else. Yeah. It's just a skill that you got to practice, like everything else. Yeah, I mean, like when I'm working, I usually have the TV playing. Like if I was just doing this on my own, if I wasn't live, I'd have the TV on and I'd have music on. And so I said, but, you're reading stuff, you're doing stuff, you can't be paying attention to all of it. I don't need to. For instance, the TV. I don't need to be watching it all the time. Every now and then I can just shift my attention to it, isolate it, and okay, whatever the story is, you hear the key points, and then in the spaces in between, I can be doing other things, right? There's a lot of dead time when you're watching TV that you don't have to be watching and paying attention because they're not really saying anything that's different, and you know more or less what's going on. You can just extrapolate and pick it up in the next time. Same thing with the music. In the dead times when I'm not paying attention to the TV, I hear the music. It's there, right? And my attention sometimes will focus in on it and zoom on it. But other than that, I still enjoy it, and I notice it when it's not there. And then I can be reading. And likewise, my reading can focus. Okay, that's a visual zooming. But in the same way as we visually zoom and we can get immersed in reading, we can do the same with our ears like Carlos did with the wind, right? It's just a skill you have to learn. And you can practice this, practice it in group situations, right? Where many people are talking, like at a party or in a restaurant. Focus on one person's voice or couple, and you start listening. Like in a restaurant, you can, if you tune in and you learn to isolate, you can be listening to somebody else's conversation. Now, it's public, so you don't have to feel bad because they know people can be listening to them. So, you're aware that everybody can hear you, or at least people near you can hear you. So there's not an expectation of privacy. You don't have to feel like you're eavesdropping because, but at a party, for instance, where people want to be listened to, same thing. But you just practice it, and you'll notice how easy it is to tune your ears, your hearing, to isolate and become immersed in the particular sounds that you're listening to. Yeah? It's very wonderful skill to develop. Yeah? Part of capital H hearing also. All right, that's about intent, and to hear more, it's about listening to content and meaning, but still, it's a similar skill, The skill of isolating specific context, a bubble, to deliberately create a bubble and go inside it, right? It's a very powerful skill. And also, the more you practice the skill, the more you realize how we have this ability innately. It's like when you're driving and you get lost in thought and you get to the other end of your drive and you don't remember driving. You were in a bubble, right? Bubbles are very important. Anger is a bubble. Most emotions, they cause a bubble, right? And we lose our awareness when we're in a bubble. But when you do it deliberately, because of that deliberation, you maintain your overview awareness. And that's a skill we want to have carry over when we get pulled into bubbles where we aren't deliberately doing it. And if you can maintain your awareness, then you can get out of that, right? And you don't get consumed in the bubble and lost in the bubble. Very, very powerful. And of course, when you do maintain your overview perspective and you deliberately inside the bubble, it changes the perception of what goes on inside the bubble. And your reactions, your responses, all are different when you connect it to overview perspective. Very, very big deal. All right. I could not count all the whistles of birds or buzzings of insects. Yet I was convinced I was listening to each separate sound as it produced. This really makes me think of the time when I lived in the desert. Yeah. And that experience was very profound because up until that time, I'd lived, well, first I lived in a little town and then in a medium-sized town and then lived in the big city. Went from one extreme to the other in my childhood. It was quite marvelous, right? I mean, from very country, very rural, very religiously dominated, to the other extreme, like very sophisticated, very worldly, etc. It was fantastic. It was really a gift in my life. But then going to the desert, this was a massive change, simply for the sound. When we first got there, it was silent, it was quiet, not a single sound. And that silence was something very, very profound. It was magical. Now, some people, for them, that sound is oppressive. Oppressive. I need to emphasize this. Yes, they experience silence as oppressive. And this is a very, very big deal. Why is that?
Silence as oppressive or sound as oppressive?
No, the silence as oppressive. I did discover the secret of Instagram. Beena,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yes.
the size of my window is important.
Hmm.
Yeah, of the Zoom window.
Okay.
So I had my
Oh.
Zoom window kind of fairly big, and my window and grain was right next to it. But then I made the window a bit smaller, and it removed grain, and now I'm showing properly on Instagram. So hello, art by Alejandro and Vandalison. All right. Anyway, hello, Instagrammers, IGers. Hello. Anyhow, I was saying the silence some people find in situations like that, they find the silence oppressive. It presses on you. It can be very stressful. And well, we were in the desert for, I don't know, it seemed like a long time, but in actual time, it wasn't that long. But when you are immersed and your awareness is heightened, time is stretched. So every day was like a month, right? That's how the experience of it felt like. So to me, it feels like we spent years in the desert, but we didn't. It was probably a couple of months only. Anyhow, but that sound was something that we were forced to learn to deal with. If you didn't learn to deal with that silence, or the lack of sound, I should say, if you didn't learn to deal with the silence, you'd go crazy with the oppressiveness of the silence, the stress of it, yeah, the difference, the absence. Just because also it's not what you're used to, and you're out of your comfort zone. You're used to noise all the time, right? So the silent difference, just our bodies, oh, it's new, it's different. You have to get used to it. You have to accommodate. You have to adapt. If you don't, and you find it stressful, you're going to go crazy, right? Because there's no way you can't deal with it in a way that you can't make it noisy. We didn't have that ability, right? We didn't have a radio, TV, or anything like that. We had no electricity, no water, no phone, no car, no nothing, right? Just us. So we were forced to deal with the silence. And of course, what happened, I suspect when we first came there, whatever was there, everything basically, oh, here's something new. And it's like, wow. And they were all silent, right? Because after a while, there were lots of birds there and insects, and you started hearing all that. But when we first came, it was completely silent. So I don't know if if the well, I have to suspect that the birds were silent. Maybe they even went away and they came back when they said, okay, they're more familiar. But at any rate, after a while, there was plenty sound inside the silence. There was still that overwhelming silence that you don't have that typical background noise that you have in cities. Like if you were to do it on audio, you wouldn't see that shh to be silent, and then you got sound, right? But in a city, you've got that the white noise. Yeah, there's an absence of white noise. Very, very big deal. But it changed our ability to perceive. And that was a very big deal, to perceive moreness that we did not initially perceive. That was very profound. Very, very profound. Yes, Beena, any comments on that? Beena? Oh, Beena's not at the computer. You're just listening. That's all right.
Yes, I'm listening. I'm listening. I was just
Okay.
lying down.
Oh,
Yes.
all right, don't let me disturb you then, sweet. Don't let
No,
me
no,
disturb.
no. I'm enjoying this.
Okay. Yeah, it's fun stuff. It's fun stuff, and I'm saying is, it's to connect to what Carlos is saying, that this is a profound skill. For me personally, I can also stop my internal dialogue, but for very short periods of time, and it just comes back. And I work on this every day, and I, I, I reignited my intent to do this more, right? To develop the skill. Yeah, it's something that you have to be fully immersed in, like everything else, because you have to retrain the brain. So, our lives don't allow for it necessarily. Uh, anyhow, so I want to make that bigger effort to really learn to stop the internal dialogue, because this is a profound life change. It's a very, very big deal. I have not in the past, knowing this, because I know this stuff from decades ago. I have deliberately put off this task because I have made an effort to refine my internal dialogue to be a Moreness dialogue. Yes, and I've gotten great value out of that. All of Moreness-Culture, Moreness, Way-Of-Impeccability, capital hearing, all of this, because I'm not running a loop of nonsense in my head. My internal dialogue is one of figuring things out, one of understanding, discernment, awareness, right? And it's a tool. And the more I use this tool, it is to the end. The understanding, the discernment is so that I have nothing that is left over for me to resolve, so that when it comes to stopping the internal dialogue, I don't have a motivation of unresolved issues, which I have to finish. I want to finish those, and I'm getting to the point of finishing that. Then stopping the internal dialogue is not a big issue. Yeah. So there's a logic to it, a moreness to it. Anyway, I'm going a bit digressing, but it's relevant, and it's part of capital R reading. Let me continue with Carlos. I could not count all the whistles of birds or buzzings of insects, yet I was convinced I was listening to each separate sound as it was produced. Together they created a most extraordinary order. I cannot call it any other thing but order. It was an order of sounds that had a pattern. That is, every sound happened in sequence. Now, keep in mind that Carlos is under the influence of the smoking mixture, right? So the perception doesn't necessarily, this order doesn't necessarily apply to our everyday life, okay? Then I heard a unique, prolonged wail. It made me shiver. Every other noise ceased for an instant, and the valley was dead still as the reverberation of the wail reached the valley's outer limits. Then the noises began again. I picked up their pattern immediately. After a moment of attentive listening, I thought I understood Don Juan's recommendation to watch for the holes between the sounds. I want to emphasize something here. And a very big point. This is part of capital H hearing. Now, capital H hearing is a program that I have, like Way of Impeccability. It's a major, big deal program, right? It's a minimum of 4 months, probably take a year, even 2 years to really assimilate it all. And part of capital H hearing, or at least fundamental to capital H hearing, is the understanding that our ears are more attuned, more adept, more expert by a long, long measure at perceiving pattern in sound. Not just pattern, but rhythm as well, cadence, implication, emphasis. We are exquisitely sophisticated with our ears. And yeah, but I don't do anything with my ears. Okay. Well, you can't easily do this nowadays. But back in the day of record players, yeah, somebody's listening to a record, just go and give the record player, just give it a little tiny bump, the tiniest of tiny bumps with a needle go. Right? It's hard to duplicate that sound, but if you know what a needle moving, like a scratching sound, that's an excessive movement. But even the tiniest, and the person's listening there, what was that? Immediately they're alerted. Right? Even the tiniest difference in that. Or in today's world, I suppose you could take your thing and let me demonstrate here. I mean, it's a massive point to understand, right? That's why I'm making an effort to show it more specifically here, right? So if we have this file that I'm working on here, Yeah, actually, this is a very good example here. Oh, I think I have to do the share with sound. So I'm going to share this with sound, and then you'll hear precisely what I'm talking about. Yeah. Oh, it is already optimized for sound. All right, Beena and I were listening to it. That's why. All right, very cool. All right. So listen up here now. This is the very end of this chapter. So we're not listening for the content. We are now listening to sound anomalies. Yeah.
Biella Noble from Addendums and Afterthoughts. Being good, Socha agent of the universe. Being, Ocha challenge of a lifetime. Ethical responsibility. Mood management. Ocha new nobility on resolute positivity. Unrelenting
All right. So
positivity.
you see, it's all wrong. And what this is, it's reading a list of hashtags. Yeah.
Oh,
And right. That's why. So it reads Ocho, whatever. But it doesn't go hashtag this word, hashtag that word. Usually they know the hashtag's completely removed, and I have to edit this out so that it's just this collection of sounds of the hashtags, right? Or just tags, really, rather than hashtags. Yeah. So if we look at this, at
mm,
what it's supposed to be, see, it's supposed to be being good, agent of the universe, being good. But look at this unrelenting positivity too. Let's just go to that last one and see how that's wrong also.
Unrelenting
You see?
positivity.
Look at the little bit of space that's in there. It's
yes,
unrelenting positivity. It's said as two words. It's not said as a hyphenated term. Unrelenting positivity. See, it's different. Your ear is able to determine this, right? Now, all right, let's go into the editing to show you. I'm making a point at how sophisticated your ear is, and you don't even know it, right? So let's just take this unrelenting positivity, okay? Let's play it again.
yes.
Relenting
All right, so now I'm going to
positivity.
take out that space in the middle here, right? How long is this that I'm taking out? Oh, it doesn't tell me, unfortunately. But I mean, uh, yeah, sometimes it used to tell me that this exactly how long the selection was, but it's not doing it now. It's not even a second, right? I think it's 0.6 of a second or something like that. It's very little. All right, so I'll take it out. Now let's listen.
Unrelenting positivity.
Yeah, see, so I must have caught some of the P there, right? You can hear it. The space is gone, but the P is but cut off, yes? You hear that, Beena?
Unrelenting
See?
positivity.
Still, it's not quite
Yes.
right. So, all right, let's undo that and let's look again. So, somewhere in here, okay. So that is there. That is positivity there. Anyway, I'm making,
Positivity.
yeah,
Positivity. Ting.
all right, try it again.
Unrelenting
Still not
positivity.
right. See? No, but even if I cut it out and there's no space because the cadence was wrong, it's still two separate words that just have no space because it's unrelenting as opposed to unrelenting positivity. It's not joined. Yeah. So even though there's no space, it still sounds wrong.
Unrelenting
See?
positivity.
But it's better at least. Anyhow, my point is about nuance of our ears, how sophisticated our ears are. Right? So that if you're not paying attention, right, unrelenting positivity, it's a little off, but not disturbing. We can notice the most minute nuances in sound. We have the skill, we have this ability, and it's automatic. You don't even have to train that much. You can enhance it, certainly, right? By just being aware and deliberate. But we have the skill. That's my point. We have the skill already, and it's a big, big, big deal. Yeah. So let's use the skill. That's why Don Juan is saying shift to your ears, or one of the reasons, right? Because you'll notice things that you wouldn't notice before. So it's an enhancement of your awareness. Yeah. Very, very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. let's continue. Let's continue. This is exciting stuff, right, Beena? Right. The pattern of noises had spaces in between sounds. For example, specific whistles of birds were timed and had pauses in between them, and so had all the other sounds I was perceiving. The rustling of leaves was like the binding glue that made them into a homogeneous buzz. The fact of the matter was that the timing of each sound was a unit in the overall pattern of sounds. Thus, the spaces or pauses in between sounds were, if I paid attention to them, holes in a structure. I heard again the piercing wail of Don Juan's spirit catcher. It did not choke me, but the sounds again ceased for an instant, and I perceived such a cessation as a hole, a very large hole. At that precise moment, I shifted my attention from hearing to looking. I was looking at a cluster of low hills with lush green vegetation. The silhouette of the hills was arranged in such a way that from the place where I was looking, there seemed to be a hole on the side of one of the hills. It was a space in between two hills, and through it I could see the deep, dark grey hue of the mountains in the distance. For a moment I did not know what it was. It was as if the hole I was looking at was the hole in the sound. Then the noises began again, but the visual image of the huge hole remained. A short while later, I became even more keenly aware of the pattern of sounds and their order and the arrangement of their pauses. My mind was capable of distinguishing and discriminating among an enormous number of individual sounds. I could actually keep track of all the sounds. Thus, each pause between sounds was a definite whole. At a given moment, the pauses became crystallized in my mind and formed a sort of solid grid, a structure. I was not seeing or hearing it. I was feeling it with some unknown part of myself. And I think I will end right there. Yeah, because now we're going to shift and we're going to get to the second part of this. But I want to end on this. I was feeling it with some unknown part of myself. Very, very crucial, as this is fundamental to capital P perceiving. Yes? Right, Beena?
Yes.
To
Yes.
understand that we
Absolutely.
can feel with some unknown parts of ourselves. Right? What page are we on now? What page are we on? Page 115. Very good. All right. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Any comments, Beena, before we go?
You before coming here, like on Zoom Live, uh, what you were sharing is still my mind is still there. Okay, because positivity, of course, as part of your being, uh, and and of course there is an innate deliberateness. I know that it sounds a bit contradictory that it's innate and it's deliberate, but we have this thing, and sometimes it happens at some point. It happens to you that your deliberateness become innate to you, and we have this. But understanding of what you have already acquired is so huge, and it's a power. Is a big, huge awareness for me because of, as we were discussing, and you shared a lot about this, that be- being so cautious of ego, being so cautious of um, getting into the superiority paradigm and getting into that, okay, have the understanding of power, having the power uh, makes you like, oh yes, some sort of like, okay, could be a possible potential uh, abuse of power or something. These are so huge things for us that we don't want to even want to even understand that fully, that oh, we have this power. Deliberately never attach this characteristics of like power to the positivity before. And when you shared that, it was a huge thing because, again, from my side, kind of an assumption that nobility, impeccability, um, and the profoundness of them is something like beyond our game. So kind of like it has to be something huge. But just my experience is limited, but I never heard anyone making it as a power, stating it as a power. I never heard that. Maybe I never read, so it's limited for me. But it is not in my understanding. And since then, when you shared that, my mind is still there. And my
Oh,
assumption
wonderful.
was that power is something ah, outside way of impactability, outside nobility. But
No,
it's a huge
no,
power.
no.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
a huge power.
it is. It
And
is. So power is not outside way of impeccability. Not at all. No, no. It is to be able to connect to power appropriately.
yes,
This is the key. And that's what the way of impeccability is. It is the entirety of it is a mechanism for connecting to power appropriately. Awareness is a power, discernment is a power, understanding is a power, application is a power. That's exactly what way of impeccability is all about, no?
yes, but in a different sense of power, like having a
Yes,
superpower.
yes. But it's also about nuance, the discernment and the sophistication of being able to understand the nuances of power. But power, especially nuance, is absolutely critical and it means everything. That one little comma which changes power from one way of connecting to it and applying it to another makes makes all the difference. It's incredible how influential nuance is to power. Yes. So we have to become
Yes,
experts at power, understanding power, using power, connecting power, feeling power, and at the appropriateness of power, which is why it's one of the enemies from Don Juan, right?
ah,
See,
yes,
that's why, because it's so nuanced. You can just assume and you get lost. Cannot assume when it comes to power. Absolutely cannot. Because it's a dangerous thing. How can you assume? Yeah.
exactly.
Same with
It's a
clarity.
dangerous thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I like also that, we took this a little bit further as part of way of impeccability. Yeah. In terms of the enemies, right? Uh, and I call them, don't want to call them the enemies of a person of knowledge or a man of knowledge. And I took that a little bit further to say the enemies of awareness, habit, fear, sadness, anger, self-importance, clarity, power, and assumption.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, just to enhance that a little bit, take it a little bit further. Where you had
Yeah.
fear, clarity, power, and old age. And
Hmm.
to me, in Moreness-Culture, old age has to be treated as an assumption. Has to be. Doesn't mean that we're going to assume we're immortal. No, but we have to assume that it's not necessarily a guarantee. Why? Because other impossibilities have turned out to not be impossible. Many instances, yeah. And when we take old age, likewise, we assume this. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean we want to live forever, because we also change our assumptions when it comes to death. That death is not a negative, not an end, but a transition. Now everything changes. Yeah. So it's very, very powerful. But habit, we can get into many habits, can really cause us a lot of problems. Sadness can pull us in, likewise with anger, likewise with self-importance, right? They all suck you in. Yeah. And they're very dangerous, very, very dangerous. You won't even get to clarity if you don't deal with those. Yeah. And I mean, you could say Anger is a kind of a fear. Yes, it is, but anger can also come from wanting things to be right. Yeah. So it's, yeah, you might say
And
anger
say
is
it
a
again,
part of
please.
self-importance. Anger can come from the frustration of wanting things to be right and not having them right. So anger can come from goodness, inappropriately applied goodness.
Oh, yes.
See, so that's why I include it as an enemy here, right? I mean, really, I should include unawareness, no, but that's in order to get clarity, you have to work on. I mean, in order for clarity to be an enemy, you have to have dealt with unawareness. So it's implied, unawareness, which is habit. I mean, the habit is a deliberately created unawarenesses. And when you start to pay attention to habit, you automatically are dealing with unawareness. Yeah, same with fear. So they take care of that. That's why I didn't include it there, more specifically. But I feel those, sadness, anger, self-importance, well, and habit and assumption, they're not automatically dealt with if you're just paying attention to fear, clarity, and power. Yeah. You can be dealing with fear, and I've got to overcome fear. But if you haven't taken care of a habit, you can fall into the habit of being fearful. You can fall into the habit of being in a bubble of fearfulness, and you're never going to get out of it. Because when you're in the bubble, you lose your awareness of what you're doing. See? Very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. Anyway, just a really in-depth and more sophisticated understanding of psychology at work. And I really feel that list probably could be expanded. Not that we want to go into each nuance. We want to keep it as short as possible. But there was something, and it came to me kind of in the night, and I've forgotten about it, so maybe I added it elsewhere. But anyway, that I feel there is something else also. And that's always how it is. That's the thing with Moreness. Moreness is always evolving. That's why with these things, we go back and we update them. We go back and we update. They always expand. They never complete. We want to not get into the habit. If we treat Don Juan's statement, which is a very absolute statement, the four enemies, he's calling it the four enemies, right? Four. You tend to get locked into thinking that's all there is, and you make it so, and you miss a lot. That we have to avoid in Moreness. That's why I just said the enemies of awareness. That list can go on, can be much longer. Not a problem, right? Just a small point that to keep in mind, just train ourselves not to get boxed in by ourselves. Yeah. Not to limit ourselves. Make sense, Beena?
Yes.
Yeah, very important, very powerful, very powerful. All right. Are there any comments I should be aware of anywhere?
Me too.
I don't see any in Restream, but all right, never mind. We'll take care of them as they come up. So Art the person joined us, and so did Lubna. Hello, Lubna. I'm keen to hear your comments, Lubna. Always keen to hear your comments. Yeah. So hello, Lubna. Hello. You are just most wonderful. Yeah, most wonderful. Yeah. All right. We go, and we'll see you on Sunday. We'll see you on Sunday. Bye bye, everybody.
Yes.
Bye bye.
Yes. Okay.